It is very important to decide who will inherit everything you leave behind, but who inherits your debt after you are long gone.
Sometimes that can lead to a very nasty surprise. Rebecca Jarvis is here with some very important information for all of us. Becky, good morning. So when someone passes away, who does inherit the debt?
Generally speaking, the debt dies with the borrower, and the estate goes towards covering whatever it can. So let's assume, for example, and I want to put this in real terms for people, because let me just say before we go into this, this is a very confusing subject, but it's an important one to discuss, and it's important because there are a lot of scam artists out there looking to take advantage of people in these grieving moments, and that's why we're doing this story. But I want to put it into context for people. Let's assume you pass with $10,000 of debt. And let's assume in addition to that $10,000 of debt, you also have $2,000 of savings and $2,000 in addition of assets. Those assets could be stocks, they could be antiques, they could be property. Well, ultimately, what goes towards paying off the lenders then is that $4,000. However, there's this remaining $6,000 that people are saying, well, what happens there? That is eaten up by the lenders. The family is not in a position to pay it. The spouse, if there's a remaining spouse, is generally speaking not in a position to pay it. So that goes towards paying off the lenders, the $4,000, and whatever is remaining, the family never owes it.
So is there ever a case where you are responsible for someone else's debt? I always thought you're responsible for your spouse's debt.
There are certain cases, and there are certain states, by the way. We should mention there are certain states, but I'll get to those in 1 second. First of all, if you happen to co-sign on a loan, when you co-sign on a spouse's loan, let's say for a home, you still owe that debt because you co-signed on it. Also, if you happen to be named on a credit card, if both of your names are on a credit card and your spouse remains, or if it happens to be a family credit card and the other family member remains after death, they must pay that debt off. Also, there are community property states, and a big one in this country is California. California is one of those places where any property acquired under the marriage becomes community. It's owned by both spouses in the marriage. It also is the case with debt, that both individuals are assigned to that debt, even if you're not named on that debt. So in those places, and you see them on the screen right now, where you can inherit debt, states where even if your name isn't on the debt, you will have to pay it off if your spouse passes.
What about something like medical costs, which for so many people, especially if this person has passed after a long illness, could be very high, those bills that linger?
These can be particularly debilitating, and what I want to make clear here is that the family is not legally responsible to pay the bills. So let's say your mother or your father, heaven forbid, passes away after a long illness. The family is not responsible for paying that off. There are some cases, however, where the spouse is responsible for paying it off. And there are cases where if the spouse were to say, I will cover the costs. If you're in a hospital and your spouse is in a hospital, and this can be pretty common in hospitals, they'll come to you and say, will you sign on the dotted line to say, if your dear husband or your dear wife passes, you will cover it. If you sign on that dotted line, you must pay for it. Also in the community states, again, under the same assumption that debt incurred during the marriage goes to both spouses, then you will too be eligible, or you must pay for that, rather.
My apologies for putting you on the spot. Do you have to sign, or is that, should I throw that question to a doctor?
Well,
Sorry.
no. I think you should talk to a doctor and you should talk to a lawyer if you are faced with that question. Because if it becomes a question of care and whether or not you can obtain care for your spouse, nobody wants to leave their spouse hanging. But before you sign, I would recommend, and in all of these cases, recommend talking to an attorney, because they can walk you through this and they can make sure that those scam artists who are out there in large numbers, the Better Business Bureau gets threats and hears about this stuff all the time, they will help you sort through it.
No, and after listening to you, I think I do need an attorney to sort it out.
You should.
All right. Thank you, Rebecca. Thanks.